You know, when I think about how people are reacting to coronavirus, there has been something that has been like really frustrating to me lately, and I've kind of struggled to put my finger on it, but after reading our scripture for this week, I think I kind of know what that thing is.
Brian Little.
Japan.
What's up, everybody? It's Robbie Schruffler. I'm back with another Sunday video. Today we're talking about the tendency to be short-sighted that's kind of being exposed all around us in society. There's a lot happening that we don't really understand, and I think the sooner that we get to the reality that very few people talking are actually like experts, I think the sooner we can get that, the sooner we're going to start to take a longer view of what's happening in the world rather than a shorter view. If you're into, these kinds of explorations of stories that come out of the Bible, how the church is shifting as we're unable to gather, or, maybe even just what it's like to be the church in the city, consider subscribing to the channel. If you like this video, hit the bell icon down below and you'll get notified anytime I post a new video. So listen, today I'm going to talk a little bit about how polarizing things have gotten regarding coronavirus and how I feel like some of the polarization is due to like a growing inability to see beyond our own circumstances, right? Beyond our own story. It's a pretty common thing to experience life from the first person perspective. We've talked about this from time to time. I see through my eyes first everything that I experience. I process how it will impact me, or those who I interact with the most intimately. Like, that's normal. However, even though I have this personal view, I also exist in different spheres, different spaces. My own interests, right? I have them, but even those interests are varied. I have my family, my wife, my 2 kids. We've got the one on the way, still looking for a name if you have any suggestions. I have my work, right? There's the church and all of the friends that I have connected to the congregation. I'm a resident of San Francisco. More specifically, I'm a resident of the North Beach or Russian Hill neighborhoods of San Francisco. Not all of those spheres intersect perfectly, right? And so, I have to develop a capacity for seeing those spheres for, both their similarities and their differences. My family lives in this house, right, that belongs to the church that's located in the middle of this neighborhood, right? So you can see the similarities stacking up. But the folks who live next door on either side of us, they're not a part of our church. Very few people in this neighborhood have young children. Some of them are a bit younger than us in their early 20s. Some of them, are probably in their late 70s, early 80s, right? And so in some ways, our spheres do intersect nicely, but in other ways, our spheres are barely connected at all, really on surface level. However, though we are different, we develop this capacity to embrace others in their differences. At least ideally, we develop the capacity for others.
It is appalling that each and every one of you sitting up there as human beings, part of the human race, the only race that we have, would suggest to muffle people, to put masks on our face, to keep us from breathing oxygen, to get us to become sickly.
You cannot mandate
You literally cannot mandate somebody to wear a mask knowing that that mask is killing people.
You're not God, and since masks are harmful, where there is risk, there should be choice. You're removing our freedoms and stomping on our constitutional rights by these communist dictatorship orders or laws you want to mandate.
Coronavirus in the United States has revealed some things about people. Early on, it's like everybody was on board and we were all ready to shelter and to take care of one another. And it was like this interesting moment because there was unity in the country in ways that we haven't really seen in a long time. But then, something changed. It was hard to shelter. Homeschooling kids is hard. Some of the information that we were told early changed, right? We were worried about a quick spread of the infection and things didn't really plan out the way that we thought that they might. And then suddenly, it felt like some folks just lost their patience when it came to caring about others, and now we have this constant barrage of people behaving badly. And when that change happened, for some, those places where we didn't have a full intersection with others, right? Those places where we were different from one another, those places that we had previously been kind of considerate towards one another, it was as if those differences no longer mattered at all. Suddenly, some folks just stopped paying attention to anything that happened outside of their own personal spheres and only cared about themselves. In a way, it's like American individualism cranked all the way up to 11. See, when we stop paying attention to anything outside of our own specific interest, we limit the amount of information that's coming in to make good decisions. Right now, across the country in Florida, we see, the signs, right? We see rising infections, we see rising hospitalizations, right? And if we've paid attention to what's happened literally everywhere else in the world where we see those things, we know that rising death tolls are right around the corner. And yet we continue to hear stories like what we just heard of people declaring that they won't wear their mask, right? Or people berating others for wearing their mask. And this is all over the country, but we see it in Florida there. The lack of awareness, or maybe the lack of care towards others, is leading people to make these very short-sighted decisions. And they're going to have to deal with the ramifications of those decisions before too long. I see this happening in society, but then I also see the scripture that we're looking at today, and I see how Esau would have fit in perfectly in this modern world, right? Because he was the king of short-handed decisions. I asked Kathleen Wong to read our scripture again, so why don't you check out Kathleen reading for us today?
Good morning, CNAS. It's Kathleen. I'll be reading today from the book of Genesis, chapter 25, verses 19 to 34. These are the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Paddan Aram, sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife, because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, "If it is to be this way, why do I live?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, the elder shall serve the younger." When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy mantle, so they named him Esau. Afterward, his brother came out, with his hand gripping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man, living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once, when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished." Therefore he was called Edom. Jacob said, "First sell me your birthright." Esau said, I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me? Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Hey, and thank you again, Kathleen, for doing the reading today. And listen, hey, comment down below and just let me know if you want to be a part of these videos as a scripture reader. I've got next week covered, but after that, I need to add some more folks to that list. So, okay, right. This passage is about the building conflict between the brothers Jacob and Esau. If we wanted to continue talking about power, we could easily look at how this passage is about the pursuit of that family's power rather than the pursuit of the covenant relationship. But we aren't really thinking about like that in that direction today. You know, I want us to think about Esau today as like the patron saint of short-sightedness, right? Like he's giving up a part of his future for a bowl of lentil stew and a drink because he's hungry right now. You know, and I get that he says, I'm about to die, right? But like, think about that in context of what's going on. He's just entered into his father's house, right? Like his father's house where he's the firstborn. The function of a lot of the folks that live in this place is just to take care of Esau and to make sure that everything is cool with his future. His hunger level had nothing to do with his decision in this moment. His decision had everything to do with his lack of capacity to pay attention to anything aside from what afflicted him right now. What was he feeling? Hungry. What was that worth? Everything, right? Like it's such a foolish and short-sighted decision, right? And we look at Jacob and we see one who's scheming for power, right? But we look at Esau and we see someone who doesn't appear to be like working to think about his decisions at all. When we look at these two, we see a pretty close picture of like what's going on in the world today. You know, it seems like one portion of our population isn't paying attention to anything aside from what's right in front of them. They're very short-sighted in their decision making. Another portion of the world today is looking at the world with a wider view and they're making decisions accordingly, but then they're also doing it for personal gain. Did you guys think that I was going to say don't be Esau, but be like Jacob? Like that's a joke. I think we're rarely trying to be like Jacob in these passages or in these stories, right? But that's like, you know, another topic for another video there. For this video, there is something between being oblivious to what's happening around us and making very short-sighted decisions, or only paying attention to what's around us for the sake of personal gain. And to understand that thing, like we have to recognize how both Jacob and Esau are similar in their decision making, not just how they're different. See, one is short-sighted in his decisions and the other is viewing the broader context of his decisions. But both of them are very like self-centered in their decision making. They're seeking relief and they're seeking power respectively, but they are making their decisions without a care for anyone other than, you know, number one. The world is changing a lot right now, and when it comes to decision making, we have to be willing to ask, what's the motivation? If the decision making is short-sighted, you know, it's likely that we're seeking solutions that serve only our immediate gain, right? We're not thinking about others. We're thinking only about ourselves. Now, if the decision takes a broader view of things that's going on, but the solution is purely for my own gain, guess what? I'm not thinking about anybody else again. I'm only thinking about myself. So the question, you know, what's my motivation is really about who am I following? Are we following our own ambition, or are we following the voice of the Father? And if we're following the Father and listening to that voice, guess what? Our decision making is not likely to be short-sighted or self-interested. I am going to be asking what is best, not for me, but I'm going to be asking what is best for you. And in finding what's best for you, the space for my benefit, my peace, right? I'm gonna be finding that as well. Listen, there's a lot out there that can upset you, and no doubt, there are a lot of knuckleheads, people who aren't paying attention to the warnings from public health officials. There are people who are purposely taking risks. There are those who just don't care what another country has done to mitigate the infection rates of coronavirus. There are those who aren't paying attention to the fact that the citizens of the United States can't travel almost anywhere in the world right now because we just haven't done a good job with it. Don't just get upset. Check yourself and make sure that you aren't simply getting upset because their decisions are getting in the way of your own self-interest. Ask yourself who you're following in the process. If you're following the Lord, you might still get angry, right? But you'll be in it for others and not just for yourself. Hey, listen, there's more to talk about in all of this. This week, we're going to be talking about listening to the Lord and being ready to make decisions based on like a long form of obedience. So if you want to be on the mailing list for the emails that I send out, just put a comment down below and let me know. If you really wanted to think about the power dynamics amongst the patriarchs so that this story between Esau and Jacob makes a little bit more sense, check out one of the videos from the last 2 weeks here. And remember this, I love you guys. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll talk to you all in the next one.